Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does on every Training Friday, and that will continue going forward, except for 2 weeks from today when he won't be here, but he's got a darn good reason. Joining me is Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Tom, thanks for coming along again today, man. And we've had today we're going to be talking about grip and I titled the episode Grip and Stance Part 2. We did have Part 1, which is almost exclusively about grip 2 weeks ago, and you got some feedback about that one, man.
I did. It's good to see you again, Paul. It's always nice to get the feedback, so I hope our listeners will freely make comments, relevant comments, please, and questions. We were talking about grip, how your hand or hands interface with the gun, and if I had to give you the ninja secret about how to get accurate shots with a handgun, because they're much harder than rifles and shotguns, it's to simply point the gun where it needs to point and press the trigger without moving the gun away from where you want it to point. So we were talking, and this is a dummy gun. All the guns I use on this podcast are inert plastic or inert metal. They can't fire, they're just for demonstration. So the FCC doesn't have a conniption. This particular one, I've got the trigger guard cut away because I use it for handgun retention. But we were talking about trigger finger placement. Some people place it right in the middle. Some people right on the joint for a semi-auto and wrap the hand around. And the comment that we had feedback on was that you can actually fire slowly single shots with just this much grip, with these fingers not touching the gun at all, because they're what wiggles the gun around when you press the trigger if you've got slack in your grip and you get sympathetic muscle contraction. So if you can get a firm grip with preferably your stronger hand and good trigger engagement, and just pressing the trigger smoothly to the rear, you can get some really accurate shots. And I had a friend of mine, thank you, Wayne, give me some feedback. He actually went to the range and tried it for himself. And lo and behold, he had some very slow but some very accurate hits on his target. So this is something I have said all along, and I will continue to preach this sermon until the day that I croak. Look at different techniques, read authors, go to classes, watch videos, but don't buy into anything unless you try it. Decide what your goal is, your mission, to get rounds on target, recoil control, movement, whatever that is. Clearly define what it is you are trying to do. Figure out a way to test for that, removing all the other variables, and then go see for yourself. And Wayne did that, and I was rather pleased and kind of proud of myself that I inspired him to go do that. But grip has so much to do with getting those accurate hits.
It absolutely does. We agreed last time that the thumbs crossed grip for weapon retention was the absolute best grip for everybody, and that thumbs up was going to get your thumbs taken off if you were in a weapons retention situation. But I of course am kidding. Again, like Tom said, try them all. Find what works for you.
Well, here's a dummy revolver, and if I get the standard grip on this, you'll notice that my thumb comes naturally down to my social finger, because my other finger is over here. Okay, and it does that very naturally. It comes down pretty far because the distance here to here isn't great, whereas, let's see, too many toys. Okay, dummy gun, if I have this same 1911 single stack semi-auto, my thumb doesn't come quite as far because the grip is bigger this way, and it doesn't come down as far on the hand. So you have to make adjustments gun to gun. Certainly revolver to semi, but also semi to semi. Here's the double stack Glock, single stack 1911. So we talked last time about getting all the slack out of your grip, and I've got that here, and you'll notice that this barrel is perfectly in line with my forearm because I've got smallish hands. Single stack is great. It's like if I pick up a 1911, it's like hugging my mom, you know? So if I point my finger, I'm pointing the gun pretty much that way, and any refinement in sights I can make easily. But if I get a fatter gun, okay, finger in the proper place, wrap it around nice and high on the back strap, and I'm going to put my finger on the trigger of this dummy gun, since we have dummy guns for that purpose, and point my forearm at the camera. You'll notice that the gun's not pointing there anymore. This is why we have different stances. Classically, people think of the three big ones. I always think of Weaver, and immediately say, oh, it's bladed and it's old-fashioned, and you're only half right. Or Chapman, or modified Weaver, and isosceles. And those all really come into one thing, and that's support hand elbow.
Yep, it absolutely does. Myself, I use the Chapman. I lock, and it's really hard to demonstrate these really well because neither of us can get up and move around. We got to stay inside the camera. But I'm going to go ahead and put me up real quick here. And what I do is I lock my right elbow just abs. I'll try and rotate so you can see. There we go. I lock my right elbow absolutely positively straight. It's locked out. My left hand comes up, and my left elbow is down slightly. You can see as I rotate that way, my left elbow is down slightly. And what it does for me, that allows me to make my right arm basically a rifle stock. And for me, at distance, that gives stunningly accurate compared to when I use isosceles or compared to when I use Weaver. I get very, very much more accurate hits at distance using Chapman than any other stance.
Think about it. It also gives you a felt index somewhere on your jaw, like cheeking a rifle stock, so you're more consistent, and consistency really is important. So I was talking about that index thing. Let's get a real 1911 just because I like them so much. So here's a classic Weaver. I said you were half right if you think it's old-fashioned and not and bladed. It is old-fashioned. It was adopted, if you're not familiar with the history, back in the late 50s by a gentleman named Weaver, Jack Weaver, who was shooting with Colonel Cooper and Thel Reed and a few other folks. And they were doing the cowboy thing. Now, us old guys remember all the cowboy TV shows. You know, Maverick and Sugarfoot and Lone Ranger. They all shot like this because they had to throw the bullets out of the barrel. And we all thought that's what shooting was. And fast draw competitions were a recreational thing in the late 50s, still are today. Shooting from the hip. I was watching an old Adam 12 rerun recently that they made those up until the early 70s. And most of the shooting that they were demonstrating, which was pretty accurate as far as the writing for what LAPD was doing, was from the hip, the old FBI crouch, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The thing that Jack Weaver did was he was pretty quick. But nobody could hit nothing. So he thought, what's my edge in competition? And this is where competition is a good thing because it's an incentive. Mm-hmm. He thought there's these bumpy things here. I bet if I can get them up to the eye real quick and get a stable platform, I can get hits. Well, at the time, the way to shoot with the sights was the old, and again, this doesn't work very well, it's the old,
bullseye stance. Yeah.
Bullseye stance, bone on bone in this really bizarre stance. And rapid fire is like, 6 shots in 25 seconds or something. So he thought, I need to get it up and I need to get a stable platform fast. So he came up with his stance again with his dummy gun, and these were all single stack semis, or he was using revolvers at the time. And he could, we'll switch over to revolver, with his thumbs down, he could take this elbow on the support side and pull it down. I'm built so that it actually contacts my upper chest here. It almost rests. Use out a little bit, and a slight bend in this arm. Okay. Sure enough, that brought the gun up to the eye, was stable, and he could get his follow-up shots. So Jack Weaver's contribution to the modern art of the handgun, and recognized by Colonel Cooper and promulgated. That's a big word I don't use much. Encouraged and taught originally at API, which became Gunsight Academy by Colonel Cooper, was to get the gun up to the eye rather than down to the gun. We see a kind of a backslide these days. People want to do this really cool, and I blame television. You want to do this?
Yeah.
Call this tickle turtle. You're hunching your shoulders up, which does no good. You're crouching down. You're not using cover, and it changes the angle of your arm to your shoulder. So if I'm doing hunching forward, and again, it's hard to do in this, hunching forward like this, so I've got the eye line to the trigger, but then I stand up straight. This is the angle of my arms to the gun. It needs to be down here. If I turtled, I'm shooting the guy in the ankle. So there's all these things that come in with it. So Jack Weaver came up with the Weaver stance, and his contribution was 2 hands on the gun up to the eye, and straight on. The reason that people say it's a bladed stance is because they were taught it was and never questioned it. I've seen some instructors attack the Weaver stance, and it's a straw argument because they're attacking because they say, well, it's bladed. The reason that people started blading in the Weaver stance, because if you look at old photos or talk to the people that were there when it was done, and I've had that opportunity to do both, it's pretty much square on. Okay? The reason people bladed is because the body armor for law enforcement at the time, the way it was cut in the arms, did not allow you to do this straight on. You had to get a slight blade to relieve the pressure here, where it pushed the body armor up and choked. That's where the history comes in. That's kind of interesting. So that was the first two-handed on the gun, get it there. Ray Chapman in the 70s took, and again, they're shooting single stacks from here with the support elbow down. I think of a weight hanging it down. And with a single stack, I find this remarkably stable. And again, not locked out, but back here. Well, he said, lock it out and bring the support elbow instead of, I'll have to do this weird, the support elbow here. Bring it from pretty much as straight down as you can get it. Bring it out a little bit. Watch what happens to the muzzle of the gun when I go from hard Weaver to Chapman to isosceles. What I'm doing is...
And I think Tom may have run over his cable.
The taunts.
You froze up there, man. I think you may have wheeled your chair over your internet cable or something.
It was something. I know it's not the cables. So real quick, just to do that again, if we're here, and I won't wheel the chair just in case the cameras get weird. Look at the elbow position. Support elbow here. Gun in this hand here. From a Weaver, hard Weaver, to Chapman, and I'm just straightening out my support elbow to isosceles. You can control where the gun goes. It's a continuum. You can adjust it to your hand fitting the particular gun you have at the time, which is something at Firearms Academy of Seattle we teach as the default stance. Spend some time with it. So if you have that stance, you know just where that elbow goes for your hand and that gun. It comes up nicely to the eye right away. Great for shooting in low light. You can bring the gun up just really screwed up, but you can see the sights visually and correct the orientation of the gun as you come up. So you really don't waste any time. A lot of things happen simultaneously.
We get a couple comments in here. Tom.
Good, I need a drink.
All right. First comment I want to get up is from Spartan6. He says, Mike Glover has a couple of good stance, grip, and hold videos on his YouTube channel. I learned a good bit about what I was doing wrong from those, if anyone is interested. I gotta admit, Tom, I haven't...
I'm making a note.
I haven't heard of Mike Glover or seen any of those videos. Have you?
I have not, but I'm making a note right now to take a look. I'm always open to new stuff. Show me something that works better, and I'm there.
And George Geller, I want to get this comment up. My 1911 hasn't jammed since I had a gunsmith work on it. Once won a bet by hitting a bowling pin at 25 yards. Yeah, but what happened to the second round, man? Is that still jammed? It just... I give a hard time.
Fun, yeah.
I give a hard time to 1911 owners all the time. I've shot some beautiful 1911s. They are not my thing. If they're your thing, fantastic. I like the feel of a striker fired. More specifically, I like a full size Glock. The feel of that is what feels best in my hand. But if a 1911 is your thing and you can get it to run properly, fantastic.
Well, this is almost a gin and tonic question. Fords and Chevys 9mm versus 45.
Oh, yeah.
It's what you shoot well. Again, it goes back to, now as an instructor, I have to be able to shoot anything. So we have striker fired guns in the safe. When I tend to teach a beginning level class, I don't like to use the custom, nice, expensive 1911s. And I do shoot them. I've got a really, really, really high-end 1911 that was given to me as a retirement gift rather than a watch. I have a watch. The instructions from my wife, who has spec'd it out to her specifications, it's a one-of-a-kind, was shoot it till it wears out. That's the kind of guns we have in the safe.
And it takes...
But yeah, if that's the gun you shoot well, if that's the gun you have, if it's what you can afford or what you prefer, go for it. The results are on the timer and they're downrange.
And I will say this as well. No matter what kind of firearm you own, including Glock, they will fail if you do not maintain them. And if you do maintain them, they will outlive you.
I'm probably evil for this, but then again, that is my nickname. When we have, especially again, beginning classes, all the firearms are on a bench on the firing line. We have a dedicated range for intro classes. So the instructors all get to look and see what's going on and anticipate problems. And usually out of a class of, say, 14, there will be 3 or more striker-fired pistols or anything else that are bone dry. And the evil part of me lets them fail. And then I keep a bottle of oil in my pocket. I say, well, this is why. And the lesson seems to stick better, because if they come into another class, that gun's much better maintained. I happen to be, well, what I have on my hip right now is a 2011 style. The 1911 beautiful trigger with the hammer and a much larger capacity. That's what I happen to like a lot. And because it's a higher end one, it has been reliable as sunrise. But you pay for that. Historically, the old GIs, 1911s you could take, and they were really, really loosely fitted and they could rattle. But when they got accurized, the fit of the slide to the frame got tightened up, the bushings got tightened up so the barrel was fitting tighter in the bushing for the bushing styles. You get much more accurate guns, but they get a little finicky, or they would have the problems with anything other than ball. But yeah, I'll shoot against you with your Glock anytime.
I would love to do that, only to say that I've gone shooting with Tom Walls again. I'll
shoot with you anytime.
We've covered Weaver, Isosceles, and Chapman at least a little bit, but I want to, a lot of that is above the waist. I want to go below the waist a little bit, because I quite often get into discussions about where specifically your right foot is supposed to be and the orientation of your feet as you are drawing and presenting. I've always taken what I do with my feet, and I'll let you explain what should be done from Tom Walls' perspective. I've always taken, for the lack of a better term, a taekwondo stance. Legs slightly wider than shoulder width apart, left foot pointing exactly at where you want your projectiles to fly, right foot toe off just a little bit. Simply because, and the way it was put to me is, what is a gunfight? First and foremost, it is a fight. Are you sure you are not going to be contacted from the side. Somebody's not going to push you from behind. Somebody's not going to rush you from the front. You need to be able to keep your balance, and what you do with your feet is all about what happens to your balance. Both feet square up, pointing at the target, and even with each other, that isn't going to help.
I can't disagree with 99% of that. And the 1% is insignificant. So remember that if we're talking gunfights and defensive handgunning, which is where I live, we need to be mobile. We need to train ourselves to a technique that requires as little extra thought as possible. So you can do correct technique repetitively every time with as little extra effort as you can put into it. Because I want as much brain power as I can muster into the gunfight itself. I need to be aware of what's going on, the old situational awareness. I'm going to be open to that and to be able to adapt. Fortunately, I knew you would go to this question when I got ready for the podcast, and I did put pants on. So let's use that. Shoes I won't go to. So you talked about, I'm going to represent feet here. Let's say the gun's in this hand on that side of the screen. Okay. To teach it, we start people out with a certain way just to get the habit built in. Being as it's a mobile thing, and we do shoot while we're moving, going forward, back, diagonally, in circles, whatever it may be. Let's learn at least the proper balance. So as you said, feet shoulder wide, or maybe a little bit wider. We need some stability. But if this is my gun hand here, I want that foot slightly back so the toe of the gun hand is right about the middle of this other foot. Okay, so they're this wide. They're both pointing at the target. Let me tell you why I say that. You mentioned a Taekwondo stance. As you get a longer and longer and longer stance in martial arts, you'll find that back foot turns out. But that's a really long stance. The reason that I say as best you can, again, God built us all different ways with different hinges and abilities and stiffnesses. To get this foot, the gun foot, slightly back and both pointing at the target, let me show you why. I think the camera will see my belt buckle. Okay, well here I'm pointing straight ahead. I've got my feet in that stance. I'm pointing at the camera. I'm about a shoulder width. I've got my knees flexed so the weight's slightly on the ball of the foot. I've got my weight very slightly forward. You'll hear nose over toes. So the recoil of the gun's got to push me back, straight up to my center of gravity going back over the back of my hips. So the gun's got to push me back to upright. If I've got my body too upright or even backwards, my center of gravity is back and it will throw me back. So a very, very slight lean, shoulders down, and then the feet forward. This naturally comes up where I need to see it. Now, you're not looking at my gorgeous face, so concentrate on the belt buckle. If I take my back foot, this one, and turn it out, not even 45 degrees, and I just relax, I just kind of let my hips fall where they may, you notice where my hips are pointing now? Or if I turn my back foot toward the camera target, just by doing that, you see how the hips naturally go there? So if I'm firing a rapid string, the gun's going up and down here. If I've got my foot turned out, I need core muscle to pull it back square, and I've got that going, and I've got core muscles that are supposed to be covering and handling all the recoil of the handgun. So by keeping both feet as straightforward pointing at your target as you can, you're eliminating the need for those core muscles in the chest, the back, the abdomen, to do all that extra work. There's always the, what if something else is going on? Well, if we learn it in an ideal fashion, we have a much better likelihood of defaulting to as ideal a situation as can be had in a given situation.
I want to get a couple more comments if I can. Another suggestion, Michael Seeklander has dozens of great videos on YouTube and Instagram. I know I've never trained with Mike. I at least know of Mike, and he's got a very good name in the training industry. Let me see here. Let me get one from Coop, C&T Designs and Arms. He says it's a stable base to shoot from, a fighter's stance, and that's exactly where I was going. You need to be able to maintain your balance, and as I said, Tom and I, north of 90% agree with each other.
It's remarkable in this industry.
I let my right foot do what my right foot does. My left foot is absolutely 100% pointed at the target. I suppose if I were to look down, my right foot would be very close. More importantly, it's slightly out and back. And maybe I do step back farther than I need to. Maybe I need to take a look at that.
Typically, if a right-handed shooter's missing, it's a little low and left. But if I find that they're going right instead, I take a look at that back foot. Guys, ladies, try it on your home range. Get that back foot turned out like I just demonstrated. See where the gun points, or do a drive. You can do it safely at home with a good backstop and an empty gun. You can muscle those core muscles back, but why?
Yeah. Well,
I'm lazy. If I'm going to learn a technique, I want the technique that is the most efficient, because I don't want to have to unlearn it and then relearn it. So experiment with that. A good instructor can help you with that.
2 weeks from today, you're going to be helping Masada Ayub teach his MAG 40 class. You're going to be doing some range safety officer work for that class. One thing that Mass does that I love in his MAG 40 classes, the live fire portion, he teaches natural point of aim with a handgun, and just knowing where, when you draw and when you come up, where that thing is going to be pointing. I love that he does that, and stance is a lot of that, is getting a consistent stance and knowing when you come up where that gun is going to end up.
Mass catches a lot of flack for that. Stress Fire is his proprietary name. Stress Fire shooting system. Mechanically, I think it's great. I think there may be other ways to approach it, but Stress Fire system is not wrong. And just because he came up with it in the late 70s doesn't mean it's out of date. Just because something's been around doesn't mean it's bad. Evaluate it. I use a lot of those techniques. Some I have modified for my own use, but I have not seen them fail. The other thing, it's almost like you saw the future coming with piston-mounted optics, red dot sights. Because of my eyes, I've switched over, and my carry guns and my shooting is even better than it was before. Guys, not that I'm a great shot, but by my standards for Tom, been shooting much better. Having a consistent stance so the gun naturally comes up to the eye. It's where you put your support hand when you draw. If you have an isosceles stance, so put your hand in the middle, because that's where it's going to end up anyway. If you're shooting a weaver that tends to be to one side, I will put my thumb right on my sternum, almost like I'm pledging allegiance, so my hand's a bit on the strong side. There's all these little things you can do preparatory in your stance for your draw stroke or from low ready or whatever you're doing by positioning correctly. How you have your fingers when you draw. I place my hand up high when I do a draw stroke. I have my fingers together. Well, they're going to go together on the gun, so why do this, have you all played, and then hope that you get consistently in the same place? When I have my hand ready to do a draw stroke, I don't have my hand like this, ready to draw. My gun hand is like this. And I've got a little wedge, or a little notch right there, so when it comes down on the gun, it goes right in that. My finger ends up high away from the trigger when I'm doing my draw stroke, and my other fingers come up high, almost a little too high, but when I come and get my firing grip, they're all together and they're tight. It's these little things. This is where professional instruction with a competent instructor can save you a lot of frustration and a lot of ammo and a lot of time, and you will see quantum leaps in your shooting as you start to get the ahas and understand the whys. Why do we do this technique? What does it give me? Where can I go with it? I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox. This is something I firmly believe in. When I started taking classes, it was like, reset. What's that? I've been pulling triggers since I was 6. Here I was many decades older, and I'm finally discovering what I wish I'd been introduced to 40 years earlier, 50 years earlier.
All right. Well, we are down at the bottom of the hour, Tom. As I always do, I need to ask you, we know what's coming up in 2 weeks at the...
We know what's coming up in 2 weeks. Asada Yubin Mag 40. 4 10-hour days that will make your head hurt. The legal stuff alone is amazing.
If you've already been to one, go again. And for Mag 40 graduates, it's 50% off to go the second time. And it's worth it. When
most of us on staff, when we're not doing range setup or some behind the scenes thing to make it smooth, we're sitting in on the class because he keeps it up to date.
Yes.
I look at when it was LFI back 20-something years ago, and the classes evolved to stay current with the times. We have other stuff. I've got a list here just real quick because I know we're low on time. In August, we have Craig Douglas coming out for Extreme Close Quarters Combat and Pistol. We have Jared Reston for Marksmanship and Room Clearing. Steve Fisher's coming out in September for AK work, or for Practical Urban Carbine is a 2-day class. Tim Herron for performance stuff also in September. We have Dark Angel Medical coming out in November. I'm signed up for that class because I want my trauma skills updated. We have our own classes with pistol, rifle, shotgun, from advanced to beginner to the thing makes the thing come out the thing. Check us out on the website, please. Best information is there, www.firearmsacademy.com.
One final question. You had no idea this was coming because I only thought of it myself 30 seconds ago. It's the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Is there thought of any bladed classes?
You mean using blades or
yes.
Bladed?
No.
I am not aware of any. Let me put it that way. I don't work the office. I am not aware of it. Bill McCormick, our owner director and lead instructor, fantastic instructor, hasn't mentioned anything to me, and I can't go into the stuff she has mentioned and isn't in fruition yet. But the way to make that stuff happen, since it is a business like any other firearm school in the country, you start asking, hey, are you going to do this or get so-and-so guest? And if there's enough demand, things might happen.
I as a much younger man, I used to absolutely be in love with blades, and I still have a nice little collection of knives. I don't do what I used to do with them though. 9 times out of 10,
want to know.
I can just carry a pocket knife. So that is going to do it for our time today. Thank you everybody for watching. Those of you who commented, thank you for commenting. And podcast listeners, thank you for listening. That's going to do it for us today. Do come join us same time tomorrow night, Saturday night, for the weekend edition of The Bullet, when the people joining me for the weekend show will be Amanda Suffolk, will be Dan Waz, and will be Tony Simon. We'll be talking about the events of the week. Please do come join us tomorrow night. Until then, everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you